Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and this is Movie Crap. I haven't done Movie Crap in a few weeks because I was away, because I had to go to England on a family kind of emergency type of situation. But I wanted to talk about one thing, basically, only in this Movie Crap, mostly because movie news is slow, and it's really the most interesting one to talk about, and that's that Phil Lord and Chris Miller have been fired by Kathleen Kennedy and Lucasfilm from directing the new Han Solo solo adventure film. But that's what I want to talk about. I'm sure you wanted me to talk about, like, the Jumanji trailer. It doesn't look like Jumanji and is just an excuse of brand recognition, so there, I reviewed it. It looks fun, though. The thing with this Han Solo movie is incredibly unprecedented in modern Hollywood. It is not unprecedented in the history of Hollywood. Wizard of Oz had like 4 different directors, Gone with the Wind, countless others. I reviewed a William Wellman film called Female, in which he shot part of, but then it had to be reshot with a different director, so it's like 2 directors working. It happened quite frequently, actually, because you had these assignment directors, so sometimes they'd work like a week on. So in fact, with William Wellman, when I did my Wellman series, I reviewed a Tarzan movie that he did a couple of weeks on because the other director was sick and stuff, and then that film ended up having like 4 different directors and different versions and things. So this has happened before, basically, but in terms of the modern setting in our current climate in the post-Spielberg, post-original Star Wars kind of a world, it is actually fairly unprecedented. It doesn't happen a lot. So I understand the freak-outedness of it, but that doesn't necessarily mean this movie will be terrible or won't be what maybe we wanted it to be. We don't know. We haven't seen the movie yet, and hey, The Wizard of Oz sort of worked out, but I don't think this film will be The Wizard of Oz. In terms of what happened, it basically seems that Kathleen Kennedy was getting the dailies and didn't like what she was seeing. It just wasn't really working out. It seems. And I think the quote was she didn't even like how they folded their socks. I don't even fold my socks. I just put them in a drawer. I didn't know that was a thing people got so upset about. I guess she wouldn't like me very much. This is different from what happened with Rogue One because Gareth Edwards had finished shooting, basically, and the reshoots they brought in Tony Gilroy. And it seems like she wanted to do a similar thing, but before the shoot had ended. Now, reshoots are fairly common in big movies like this. They're actually put into the schedules when they're announced. So I'm sure a reshoot schedule was going to happen with Han Solo. But to just flat out fire the directors because they weren't going to cooperate like Gareth Edwards would supposedly kind of seems a little short-sighted, but it kind of comes down to a couple of things: how the Star Wars cinematic universe is run and how directors are chosen. And the thing with Star Wars is it's kind of like a huge, gigantic franchise that most major directors right now got into filmmaking because of Star Wars. So of course they will do a Star Wars movie if asked, you know. So basically they can pick any director they want. There's probably a few directors like Spielberg turned down Force Awakens. There's a few directors who won't, or Del Toro or something. I think Del Toro said no. But most likely you can get pretty much anyone you want. But they can just pick and choose any director, and it kind of feels like how many people feel like a big sports team who has the money to buy up any sports player person, from my weak understanding of sports, in that I know that they play sports, and that's kind of it. I'm aware that sports exist, I just don't know very much about it. That they can pick and choose the most high-profile directors who they know who can give them hits. And that's different from what Marvel does, because Marvel, although it feels like anyone will see anything at this point, Marvel uses that kind of to their advantage. They hire people like James Gunn, they hired someone like John Watts, who doesn't have a lot of experience and didn't even have a really big indie movie or anything. In fact, they bought him up before his indie movie got released. And even the Russo brothers were considered at the time kind of an out-of-left-field choice, in 2014 at least. And I think with the Star Wars movies, we're not really seeing that. Except for maybe Rian Johnson, everyone else who's been involved in the Star Wars cinematic universe thus far has been involved with rebooting something, or at least dealing with the brand even. You know, you have J.J. Abrams from Star Trek, you have Gareth Edwards from Godzilla, you have Lord and Miller from 21 Jump Street, and even working with a big property like Lego, you have Colin Trevorrow, or whatever his name is, who did Jurassic World. And so these are fairly easy if you're, you know, a corporate executive. Go, who rebooted that other really popular thing? Let's get them over for our reboot thing. It doesn't feel as interesting, really. And that's kind of always been the problem with their director choices. In fact, in 2014, when they were just sort of, it felt like gobbling up people. Like Gareth Edwards signed on to do the Star Wars movie, what was it, like 10 days or something after Godzilla opened? And it didn't feel like a director who I would necessarily pick to do Rogue One. It seemed like an odd choice, really. She just bought someone up because they were big at the time. That's kind of the problem with how Kathleen Kennedy, or how Lucasfilm as a whole, really, is picking these directors. They need to pick people who are right for each of the movies. The only one who I thought, that's amazing, I can't wait to see their take on it, has been Rian Johnson. J.J. Abrams, I felt kind of disappointed. It felt like a really conservative, boring choice as a director. And so when they bought up Phil Lord and Chris Miller, I think they just thought, these are 2 really big directors. They've had a bunch of hits. They've worked with a major company like Lego. They rebooted something with the 21 Jump Street movies. So obviously that'll work out for us because, you know, they've done these big corporate, you know, sequel kind of a things, and it should be fine. I think that's the thing, is like she wanted clearly a different Han Solo movie and didn't think about making Phil Lord and Chris Miller's Han Solo movie. This doesn't bring me a lot of faith in what they're going to do with the kind of side Star Wars movies or a Star Wars story franchise or whatever. It was supposed to let different kinds of directors do different takes on the Star Wars universe, and frankly I would have been really like that, since I don't really want a Han Solo movie at all, and I would have, you know, enjoyed kind of a different take on Star Wars. I know people have constantly keep saying like fans are sick of the same old take on Star Wars, and I'm like, are they though? I don't think so. There's like no evidence to suggest that. I think people are just sort of mad that some directors who they thought this could be a little different could really inject a different kind of a voice into the Star Wars universe. But it's probably not going to happen. She wasn't picking interesting indie directors. Jeremy Saulnier was not on this list. There were not like cool indie directors who do weird stuff on there at all. It doesn't feel like these are picked from a cinephile. This is someone who picks from the biggest rented movies at Blockbuster Video, if that still existed, but you get my point. Star Wars kind of cinematic universe needs to definitely reassess. And the thing is, all the directors and movies have pretty much been chosen up to 2019. Whatever is going to come out in 2020, which presumably is a Star Wars story if they keep doing the Star Wars movie a year thing. So we won't really see the future of this probably for a while, but, you know, they picked Colin Trevorrow really far in advance, so I wouldn't be surprised who they pick next. But it doesn't seem like it's working out, since other than Rian Johnson, or at least as we understand it so far, none of these director relationships have really worked out. J.J. Abrams was supposed to be producing all of the saga movies originally, and even probably a lot of people assume had some hand in getting Rian Johnson the job, but he isn't producing any of them and isn't going to have a hand in writing them like we originally thought he was going to do when he signed on to do Force Awakens. It seemed like there was no real fights, but they just decided they didn't really want to work together again. Gareth Edwards ended up having his reshoots handed by Tony Gilroy, and now we have the thing with Phil Lord and Chris Miller. This was pretty shocking to like be you're 80% done, you're almost done with the shoot. You hired these guys. None of this stuff was working out. All these cinematic universes have the same problem, is that they don't get how Marvel really works, is they hire interesting directors to do these superhero movies. James Gunn would not be hired by the Star Wars people. He wouldn't be hired by like any of the other cinematic universes, but yet he made one of the biggest franchises going on right now because Marvel had faith in him. And frankly, yes, I know Marvel didn't work out for someone like Edgar Wright, and that was pretty unprecedented too. He developed it pretty much all the way up until production, and then they hired, you know, Peyton Reed and stuff. What this says about the future of these cinematic universe type films, and what this says about specifically Star Wars, I think it'll say more about this, but I think these cinematic universes are more producer driven and more corporately driven, and driven in a way that they want these things to be successful and work in a certain way. I think Kathleen Kennedy maybe has, and Lucasfilm and Lawrence Kasdan, who also had a major part in this, has a little too much control over their cinematic universe. Where Feige, I think, is a capable producer, and I actually don't think the Han Solo movie will be bad. I mean, look at the kind of overseeing producer thing they did with Rogue One. I don't think Rogue One's a bad movie, but it's not an exciting movie. Kathleen Kennedy is a very good producer. Her first producing credit was actually E.T., I shit you not. She worked with Spielberg, Clint Eastwood, and everybody like that, but it seems like these are directors who knew exactly what they wanted, and were pretty much, you know, going to work in the established Hollywood setting. I'm not going to say what a lot of people have said, and say work in more of an old school Hollywood type of a way. I sort of disagree with that. I don't think that really changes. I'm not going to look at like who's run the Star Wars films as their old school Hollywood, and this is new school Hollywood. First off, it's like, I don't think Phil Lord and Chris Miller are going to bring about, you know, the new Hollywood renaissance of the 2010s or something like that, so chill the fuck out. I just think it's more just that she's used to directors working very linear, traditional, to the script kind of a way, and Phil Lord and Chris Miller were never really those guys. And I think if Kathleen Kennedy and Lucasfilm and Lawrence Kasdan want to run the Star Wars films like this, then they should hire directors who they are more comfortable with. And honestly, I wouldn't have minded, but I will say, and I tweeted it before, is that if Ron Howard had been announced to direct the Han Solo movie, I probably would have gone, really? But maybe that's what makes them more comfortable. Maybe they should actually work with like a female director or a different kind of a director, or a director that would actually be exciting. Maybe those directors aren't interested. I don't know. But I think this is probably one of the most interesting stories of the year, because it just frankly doesn't happen anymore. You never hear about directors getting fired 80% into making a movie. That's pretty ridiculous. I mean, like, why didn't you just let them finish it and then fire them and do the reshoots? I don't get it. I'm curious what it would be. Was it really Ace Ventura take on Han Solo? I can't imagine what that would be. Do they mean like the Teen Titans Go kind of take on Han Solo? That just seems like a horrible idea, but I think this will probably have major ramifications, and this is different from the Zack Snyder thing, as he didn't want to work anymore because of a family tragedy and Joss Whedon took over. This is very unprecedented in terms of what's going on with these cinematic universes, and it might be showing a lot of directors who don't want to do those things anymore, and they might just get these younger directors, specifically with that John Watts interview that Screen Crush did, where he kind of doesn't seem to even know if Uncle Ben exists in the Spider-Man Homecoming kind of a world, which is kind of interesting. Who's really running the things, and who's the real auteur running these films anymore? I don't think that changes the quality of them, though. And I think that's something we're going to have to wrestle with in terms of film fans, is understanding that sometimes the director isn't the one who necessarily made it. Just like with Gone with the Wind or with Wizard of Oz. Those were studio productions, and we love them. And I'm not saying that makes it good, and it's kind of a shitty thing artistically to just take a movie away from someone, but I am saying, like, just don't disregard this film until it comes out. There's a lot of ramifications and implications about this whole thing, but I think it's going to be interesting how it plays out from here. I think the two things is when this movie premieres, whenever it's coming out. Bob Iger said they're not delaying it, so that should be fun working on that set. And who's going to direct the Star Wars film after they let Colin Trevorrow make a Star Wars movie for some reason. So that was Movie Crap. Sorry if this was a little shorter and just me talking about one thing, but I did talk about Jumanji real quick, so I should deserve some credit for that. Also, Edgar Wright had one of the biggest openings of his career, and I think that's pretty cool that he actually has a bona fide hit for once. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. Talk below about Han Solo if you want to. Sorry it was gone. Another Movie Crap will be up next week. Comment below in the comments if you'd like to talk about the Han Solo thing and say, I don't think it's that big of a deal, or I think it is. And Jim, why did you think of this thing? When are you coming back to the Pizza Party podcast? Long poem thing, although I like that one. Anyway, so comment, leave all those comments below, and subscribe if you would like to.